Good morning. So, Wisdom Soup, as many of you already know, is a community that I started years ago at the very really as I was sort of embarking on my journey. And it came out of the realization that I really needed peeps. Like I needed to find some friends. And I had the friends that I had were not interested at all in spirituality. And I didn't know. I know some of you guys say that you feel like the lone White House, like lighthouse out there, like you're like in a field of people who are asleep and you're like the lone lighthouse. And that's how I felt. But it turns out I was actually surrounded by people who were into it, who were into spirit. I just didn't have a way to find them. So I rented a theater in downtown because why not, go big or go home, right? So I'm like, I rented this theater in downtown Bellevue and I put an ad on Meetup and thank God, like 25 people showed up. And I made a bunch of friends and I set it up as a speakers community where I was like the first sacrificial lamb and I was the first speaker. And then I saw it as a way to shine a light on other like amazing practitioners and people in our space who had really cool things to share that maybe you've heard of and maybe you haven't heard of, or maybe you haven't heard their stories before. So in the beginning, we always met in person, which was amazing. And then COVID hit and we took it online. And what was so cool about that is that it broadened the community to literally all over the world. But the spirit is always the same. And we call it Wisdom Soup because that idea that when you make a soup, you get to make it out of whatever you like. So you look in your fridge and you're like, what sounds good to me? So we come to Wisdom Soup with an open mind. We come with an open mind and an open heart with the idea that there's always something for us to learn. And then from whatever you receive, you take whatever you want to put in your soup and you leave the rest. So it's this idea that we are constantly growing, constantly learning, exposing ourselves to new ideas. And this process, being part of Wisdom Soup, has absolutely expanded me over the years. There's a ton of things that early in my journey that I was really reluctant to embrace. That I always joke around. I always thought crystals were rocks. I didn't believe in dragons. I didn't believe like in all this stuff. I was pretty like narrow, bar. And then now I would say I'm wild and free in my belief systems and it's because of all the learning I've done here in this community. So anyway, so in that vein, I'm super excited today to invite somebody that most of you guys already know him, but those of you who don't, you're super psyched to meet him. So I'm inviting in Emilio Ortiz. And some of you know him from his awesome podcast, which he has started. He is one of our young ones, which I just think is so incredibly valuable that we talk a lot about how the new generation is different and what a different world it would be if we had come into the world the same way that they did. If we were where they are today, what a different world it would be as opposed to having go through our hard knocks, right, of our life planning. But they have come in more open, and I would definitely say that is true about Emilio. And I don't know if you guys, he is always the one asking the questions. And that's what's so fun about today. Today, we get to turn the tables and have him answer the questions. So, how is it that a young person gets started at such a young age on a spiritual journey and comes so far so fast? And what are the amazing bits of wisdom and knowledge is Emilio going to share with us today? So if you guys are ready, and if you guys, as we're chatting, I see you guys it's so awesome to see everybody in the comments. Thank you so much for being here with us. If you have questions for Emilio, pepper them in too, because that's part of the fun. So, all right. So here we are. Are you ready? And let me bring you in. Emilio, welcome. It's so good to see you.
We made it. We made it. I see also a lot of familiar faces in the chat as well. So it's so good to be here and so good to see everyone and be here live because I don't normally do live things. So I'm really excited to be here, Ann, and thank you for the invitation.
That is so awesome. Yeah, I'm super excited about it. I had a ton of fun also just putting together the questions. And I really appreciate just like I think that you being here is just a reflection of how open you are. That you
Mm.
when we talked about it, you were like, yeah, let's do it, not a moment of hesitation, which I think is just awesome. So, all right, I got to start out with the question, the first question that we always ask, in terms of those of us on a spiritual journey, is what put you on your journey? What is your spiritual story? How did you get started?
Wow. Well, I would say for a lot of us, it's the moment we're born, right? The moment we take that first breath, we become spiritual beings inhabiting form. And for me, really, I had an upbringing that led me to move around to a lot of different places. Due to my dad's job, I was constantly like 3 years here and then 3 years there, 3 years another place. So
Wow.
I developed this personality from a very early age that was very adaptable to my environment. And even though that has a lot of pros, it also has some things that actually lead you to wherever you find yourself, you become that. And so I found myself in some environments where maybe I would lose some of that original essence of who I am, like a lot of us must experience in the earthly realm. We're faced with hard experiences, saying goodbye to certain people, which was always the case for me. Kind of developing an unattached personality throughout my upbringing. But I was also a very curious child. Everything would give me wonder. I lived in California for 8 years up until I was 16. And I remember living very close to the beach. And every time I would go with my friends and we would build like castles, we would create jacuzzis, like right by the where the shore is, so that when the water came in, we could go inside the jacuzzi and just be there and like building our own worlds. And I feel like that was the first expression of, this creative essence that we all are. But there was a moment where I had this very clear path in my journey. I wanted to become a basketball player professionally, maybe not the NBA because I'm not 6'5", but I wanted to play professionally at some degree. And my life revolved around the sport. And I was in California. I had been moved to certain teams and playing in certain clubs where, let's say, in a weekend, I was playing around 4 to 5 games in 2 days. And my parents, being the amazing parents that they are, they would just take me around to all of these games that I had and all over Orange County, all over California. And that was my path, and I had it very clear. And I would show up to practice 2 hours early, leave an hour later, and was just really keen on making this my life path. And then all of a sudden, around 16, I was a sophomore in college. My dad tells me, or he starts traveling a lot outside of the country. He starts going back to our home country, which is Colombia in South America. And all of a sudden, he started traveling, and I was right in the middle of my basketball tournament. We actually won that year, and everything was looking bright. Everything was looking good. I had a few college basketball coaches coming to my games to scout me, and so it was getting serious. And that was really like what consolidated my desire to want to continue my basketball journey. And then one day, my dad travels again back to California, and he picks me up from school one day. And I'd look behind, and my sister's in the back crying. And my sister's a bit younger than me, so she's crying. And instantly, my intuitive abilities were like, something is off here. And I looked at my dad and I said, "What's wrong?" And he said, "Well, California had been the time where we had most spent, consecutively 8 years. So I was telling you guys before that 3 years here, 3 years there. We had been a while already, and I had all of my friends there. My brothers from basketball, the team. And then all of a sudden, my dad says, "Well, I don't know how to tell you this, but we're going to be moving again. But this time, it's nowhere in within the U.S. It's all the way back to Colombia." And I was like, I threw a tantrum in the middle of the car. Like I was banging on the windshield. I was just like yelling at the top of my lungs. And I was like, you can't take me from this environment where I absolutely love my life here. And so eventually, like he gave me a 6 month notice. I waited until 10 days before I left to tell all my friends because I couldn't
Oh,
accept the fact that we were moving. And then we found ourselves in Colombia, which was a very different environment. The kids here were a lot more developed. They start partying earlier. Their parents give them alcohol earlier. So I felt like I was behind. And since I had this really adaptable personality at the time, I just went straight into that and plugged into that society and culture and became someone that I was completely not. I was unrecognizable to my parents. I was rebellious. I didn't talk to my dad for a few months. And so that really started me on like a downward, like a fall of my own consciousness, my disconnection from myself. I stopped playing basketball, not stopped completely, but the passion behind it was gone because you go to a country in South America and everyone here is playing soccer or football, as we call it. And so no one paid attention to any of the basketball games. And I'm here like now who am I when none of this was really important to the external world. I'm not getting the motivation with the level of competition that is here. And so I was just in a deep kind of depression, but I just went through the last 3 years of high school, and my personality changed a lot. So I hit this rock bottom where I became a party guy and going out all the time and really not really thinking about my future. So when college applications came around, I was just like, I'm going to wherever I get accepted to, not really striving for anything bigger. And eventually I was accepted to a university in Madrid, Spain. And when I get to Madrid, it was like a enhancement of everything that I had been working through. The alcohol amplified, all of that stuff. The partying in Madrid is a whole nother level. And so I would say where my spiritual journey started, it was probably during that initiation of getting so disconnected from myself that I had to slingshot back. And then there's a moment in that story where my mom comes in. She had been training as a Kundalini yoga teacher and a sound therapist in California. Um, so she was going to all these seminars with all these spiritual teachers and listening to Hay House Radio, and had all these books in my house. But before that, I was like oblivious to all of that, what she was getting into. And so it was in that moment in college, 8 months down the line of my first year, I get my grades for the first time of my second semester. And I hadn't really been going to class because in Spain, if you guys have been to Spain, they party Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, the whole week, even on Sundays, even on God's day, they're partying. And so I told my mom, like, I can't keep up with this rhythm. I got really sick physically, and I was taking antibiotics like 3 times in those 8 months, just to cope and get by and go to class and get to class at the very back. Sometimes walk into the university with sunshades on and not really, caring about my future. And then during that time, it was when my mom said, "Okay, I need to visit you. I need to check in on you." And I just broke down to her one day and I like laid it all in a conversation. I said, like, I'm not okay. And it was, I think, the first time I admitted to myself, like, I'm not physically okay. Because I had just been exploring these realms in these denser frequencies per se. And it was at the time where I just knew like I couldn't keep going like that. And so one day she sits me down and she says, "Okay, I'm gonna try to teach you meditation." She had tried to teach me many times before. That's why I say she was gonna try, because she tried many times before, and I was just like, I'm not doing that. Um, and when we sat down, she starts playing these beautiful mantras, these Kundalini yoga mantras that are mostly in Sanskrit, tones and sounds and frequencies I had never heard before. And the first reaction of my body and my nervous system was just to release all the emotion I had been storing from the last probably like 8 or 9 years. And what happened was this release of emotion. And I just felt so much lighter afterwards. When I opened my eyes, I looked down at my hands and I could see energy running through the palms of my hands, like colors, patterns, geometry. I looked outside my dorm room and I had a view of the street with some trees on. It was the middle of spring. And then I see like the greens that like the shades of green I'd never seen before. I looked at my mom and she's radiating and I'm like, what am I tapping into this reality? And so that led me to a journey of just exploration, asking questions, making meditation a non-negotiable in my life, and then slowly tuning into these realms more often. And then that radically changed my direction. The rest of my college journey, this was freshman year, and then the rest was a whole different experience.
Oh my gosh, I love that. And it's so interesting because I think so many of us have that moment, the moment where it's like we get to somehow things get ripped away. We get to that moment of crisis, and it's amazing that because I'm curious. I think we're all curious about how the journey is different when you start younger, but it sounds like it's similar in that you had the moment of breakdown. You had the moment where, and it's all, I wonder, as you're telling the story, I wonder if it was your willingness to open up to your mom, that that sort of coming to peace or internal truth with yourself, that allowed, as you started to listen, that allowed those emotions to come up. Was it the what you were listening to, or was it the fact that you had opened the door?
Yeah, well, she was holding space for me during that meditation,
Uh,
and I think a lot of what I was feeling was just the reassurance of her like motherly presence in the
yeah.
room with me. And when she came to visit me, like a few days before that, I had a pile of clothes unwashed. I called it the Great Pyramid of Giza in my room, and so she comes in and she's like helping me like sort things out, kind of organize my life. And so really just surrendering to her energy was a huge jumping off point for me then to have this
Wow,
experience.
that is so amazing. So, okay, so you went from that to, and you thought you were going to be originally going into basketball, and then you went down at what point did you discover or get this idea of starting your podcast? And those of you that don't know, or that if you're unfamiliar with his podcast, it's called Just Tapped In. He has over 230,000 subscribers. So he's done a lot of work, a lot of work. And so how did you, like, that's where you got to, like, that's where you are today, but where did you start? How did you get from that dorm room and this big moment of awakening to the point where you're like, I'm whole hog on this podcast thing?
Yeah, and it's interesting you mentioned the subscribers because actually today we have a group chat with my team, and for those of you that don't know, there's 7 of us in my core team and the average age is 23. And so we're mostly, early 20s, I'm mid late 20s. And someone texted in the group like, "Hey, I just saw that you're about to hit 1,000 videos on your YouTube channel."
Oh my
And
God.
so like for me, like that's more celebratory than the actual growth of the channel itself because it's the consistency and the willingness to put out a video,
Yes.
again and again and again and again times 1,000. I can't even imagine like, well, I mean, it's been some years, right? But it's just the accumulation of that devotion and that energy that gets put into something that you love to do. And the reason I started was because what got me out of this rock bottom, apart from meditation, was actually exploring YouTube and finding conversations, podcasts, videos that were speaking to a layer beyond my ego, which was more so my soul. I actually started with a little bit of conspiracy theories. I'm not gonna lie, that kind of gripped my attention in the beginning,
Yeah.
and I was, I remember instead of being out till 3 a.m. partying, I was at 3 a.m. watching conspiracy theories in my phone. But also I was just like really opening my mind to other ways of thinking. I never grew up with any religion, even though my family considered themselves Catholic. It was never forced upon me. I was never, obligated to do my confirmation or anything of that nature. So really my understanding of God was sort of surface level, like, oh, there's a guy in the sky with a beard, and he tells you whether you go to him or you go down to this other realm where there's another guy with horns. And I'm like, but I don't know. Like, I don't know if I buy that. And I remember from a very early age, like before I would go to sleep, um, I wasn't a light sleeper. So it would take me some time to go to sleep. And I just would start, like, I don't know, I'm 10, 11, 12 years old, thinking about the eternity of creation, if that makes any sense. So I'm like, well, I know that after this life, like there's an aspect of me that's going to continue, but infinitely. And then I just couldn't wrap my head around the infinite part. But it was just this vastness that was like opening me to a new way of thinking. So I was already very open-minded when I came into all of these things. So I was exploring in the beginning, it was very much so like personal development. I think that what I needed was to understand like that aspect and health, nutrition, wellness, taking care of myself first to really be in the body until I could really open up spiritually to these ways of thinking that my mom was already pretty advanced in, but I wasn't there yet. So in the beginning, I was consuming maybe two, three, four podcasts a day. And
Wow.
so shortly thereafter, I found myself going to school one day, and then all of a sudden, there's instead of my normal class of 40 people, there was only 5 people. And I'm like, what, where is everyone? And I checked my email because I didn't check before I went to class. And they were saying, like, today class is optional. There's this virus going around, things are happening. And so that was the start of like the pandemic times for me. And a few weeks in, Spain was probably one of the hardest hit countries in Europe after Italy with the pandemic. So there was all day in the news, like all this fear, all these things going on, and I ended up just getting locked down in my apartment. And the partner I was with, she moved in with me because she was living pretty close by. All my roommates left back to their countries. I stayed back, and it was with all of this free time that I started realizing, like, for the last 2 years, I've been reading, exploring, learning all of this information in my head. But I want to start sharing it with, in the beginning, it was really about sharing it with my friends and people that were in my vicinity, my college friends, because I'm like, this could change your life. Like it changed my life. And so my university was doing an incubator for startups where you could apply to pitch an idea to real investors. And so I'm here with a friend of mine who we became friends a few months earlier. And he came to my house one day and he had his backpack on from school. And we give him a tour of the house and he goes into my room and he sees all these books like everywhere. And he's like, "Oh, like you like to read?" And I'm like, "Yes." And he starts pulling out 3, 4 books from his backpack. And he's like, "I've been reading a lot too. We should start exchanging some books." And we started doing that. And it was with him that we decided to apply to this incubator program. And what we wanted to create was a education digital platform for college students to learn about these concepts, ideas, and tools that would help them perform better at school in their daily life, optimal health, things of that nature. And so we applied to that. But then every startup that applies, they get given a mentor in the program. And the
Mhm.
mentor in the program happened to be a woman who was really into Dr. Joe Dispenza's work. And she did
Oh my
neurolinguistic
gosh.
programming. And so she was like the perfect match for us. It was completely random that she got assigned to us. But with her, it was like, all right, well, you guys need to understand if people your age are interested in this stuff. Like you need to have in the startup world, they call it like a minimum viable product, an MVP that you need to share to see if people really care or have any interest, if there's a market for it, right? So what you guys could do, and she planted the seed, is start a podcast where you can sort of start interviewing some of these people in the spaces that you're interested in to see if there's interest. And I was like, I don't care if there's interest. Like, I want to talk to them anyway.
Yeah.
And I started inviting some people, and that was around the time where my mom, being in the pandemic, they were still back in Colombia, and they were like, "You need to come back right now." And I was like, "No, I'm staying. I'm doing this incubator program. I can't leave Madrid." And then my mom was like, "Well, here." She sent me a subscription to her subscription to Gaia, and then that just unlocked more of the spiritual like side of things. And I remember late at night we were watching a show with a woman named Regina Meredith, and she was interviewing this bald guy named Lee Harris, and they're having a normal conversation, and then all of a sudden she goes, "Okay, I'd like to talk with the Z's." And then I'm here like, what are the Z's? And then he closes his eyes and he starts channeling in a different accent tone the wisdom that came through. And that was my first introduction to channeling. And
That's
I was
awesome.
already starting to do interviews. And then once the personal development, health and wellness side sort of, I felt I had good foundations in that. I wanted to explore more metaphysical, esoteric things. Because for me, like when you're working on yourself, you can't really ask those transcendental questions. Um, you need to be in your body first. And then once I was more integrated, I could explore these other things. And then I started inviting some people in that space that I would see on these channels and Regina interviewing, and that just snowballed into really what it is today.
That is so, so cool. I have to incorporate some of the questions because you're getting so much conversation happening in the chat. Everybody's loving you,
I,
Amelia, just so you
I don't
know.
know how to leave details out. That's my biggest challenge.
So yeah, so I just have to share. So one person is just curious, quick question. What was your major in college? What were you originally majoring in?
So I had no idea when I first started applying. So the basic business administration.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And then also really good idea from Denise was, have you ever thought about having your mom as a guest on your show, like maybe on Mother's Day? Has that ever been, have
Yeah,
you ever done that?
no, we haven't. We've sort of talked about it. Haven't fully planted it. But I feel like it is something that I definitely want to do at some point.
That is awesome. So, and then we have some deeper questions too, but I also wanted to get into, in terms of like actually the running your podcast and because I know there's so many people in our community that talk about wanting to get started and, you know, or wanting to share their gifts in the world in one way or another. And you having done that, gone into the process of creating a podcast and really creating a life for yourself around this. I'm really curious, like through that process, how has it changed you? So like let's just start like who was your first big interview? What was the moment that you were like, okay, this is something?
Mhm. I feel like when there's an internal flame or passion that moves inside you, it's very difficult for any external force to stop that. And
Yeah.
so when I had this fire of just sharing and connecting with these people, it was like head down like a bull. Really channeled a lot of my masculine energy in the beginning. And because at that point I was 21 years old and I was reaching out to a lot of people, getting a lot of no's, getting a lot of not at this time, getting a lot of you don't have a big enough platform, getting a lot of rejection. But even because this internal flame was lit inside me, I just kept going and I kept going and I kept persisting. And it was very masculine at first. I need to say that to
Yeah.
begin with because it was a push rather than a pull. Now
Yeah.
it's more so a pull. And also there was still some wounding in the beginning of myself feeling like when I opened up to this world, I felt like I didn't know anything, like Socrates would say. And so there was almost this wound of you're not smart enough. So you need more knowledge, you need more conversations, you need to read more books. So in the beginning, it kind of pushed me. And there was a moment where so I started reaching out and my mission was very clear. I wanted to create a bridge between this new consciousness that's emerging and the young generation of leaders that will be stepping in and create that intergenerational link
Yeah.
because I could see like I have my grandparents and I wasn't very close to them growing up because we moved around and I was outside of the country. But I would have loved to, right, have elders around me and have more wisdom around me. So that's why I was reaching out to the people I was reaching out to. And one of the like initial interviews that really opened me to what was possible was reaching out to people like Greg Braden, Bruce Lipton, Neil Donald Walsh, um, and them saying yes to me. And I feel like their shared vision of wanting to help the younger generation was what allowed that link to happen because like in this space there's still there's some things that people like if you have a big platform I'll go on your podcast and things of that nature, but I feel like it was very egoless in the beginning, and the reason why these people said yes to me, and that yes really is, and I'll never forget, like when someone believes in you, it opens a doorway to possibilities in your life. And sometimes we need to cherish all that we can, all the people that believe in us. And so these people believed in something and in something I wrote in my email. That was way before ChatGPT. So I would sit down before any email, I would do a meditation for 10 minutes, and then I would write whatever, like it was an automatic writing that would come through in the emails in
That's
the beginning.
awesome.
And so it was like maybe they felt the heart, maybe they felt the resonance, the authenticity that was coming through my sincere curiosity and desire to learn. And yeah, and then that led ultimately to an interview with Joe Dispenza. That was a whole initiation for me, and that was where I really knew this is my path. At the end of that interview, he tells me, uh, "Keep going. You're gonna be really good." And so I never forget that. Like sometimes I even when I forget, we can always forget our journey. When I forget, I go back to that interview and I go back to seeing like all of the people. Now it's more than 1,000 videos, people that have believed in me, people like you, and so people that have said yes to wanting to co-create, and that's what I'm really grateful for.
That's so, so awesome. I can just imagine how you felt, especially since your mentor in that program had been a big, so Joe Dispenza was part of your process, and then to come full circle and to be able to have that one-on-one conversation and for him to say to you, those incredibly encouraging words, you must have just been high as a kite.
I definitely was, definitely was.
Was there ever a time as you're going through this process? I know that it's like it's being an interviewer, you have to keep one foot in reality, like you're listening, but I know you also have to like guide the conversation. But has there ever been in any of your interviews, like one that really stands out as like it transformed you? Anytime you've ever had a conversation like that where you felt like you came away changed? Maybe it's happened a bunch of times, but what stands out?
Yeah. Many times for sure. Because like for me, it's not just the 1 hour, 90 minutes that you're with a guest. It's actually all the preparation that led you to be a vibrational match to talk with that guest or to listen to that guest or to, come across that person's teachings. Like, what did you do before that made you a vibrational match to this? And so I feel that there was many instances that I can't even count, but it was really when I started opening myself up to the channeling space and understanding that there's no bounds on consciousness, that we can go inside and tap in and we can access other fields and qualities of consciousness that are not from the personality self. And it was the first ever channeled interview that I did was with Lee Harris. And this was back in 2023. I was in the middle of my master's program. So I went to go do the master's back in Madrid because my undergrad experience was cut short. And so, this was the third year of university. The next 3 semesters were lockdowns, virtual classes. And so I graduated, but I didn't feel like I had actually moved on to the real world. And so I told my parents that I wanted to go back to school, but also it was an excuse to keep working on the podcast until I could prove to my dad that I can make this like an actual career. And so I would go to class and then run my apartment and record interviews and prepare and read and do all these things. So it was a lot in that year, but it was one day where I get back from class learning about who knows what. I was studying like marketing, and I'm there and I'm sitting with Lee, and all of a sudden the opportunity arises to have him channel. And the first words that came out of the Z's mouth were directed specifically to me. And it activated a soul remembrance of why I'm here and why a lot of us are here as well. And one thing I didn't mention in the beginning was when I started making meditation a habit, I also started naturally being drawn to write in a journal after my meditations because I would see a lot and I would, have a lot of realizations. And I went back to that notebook. It's actually in Madrid. I don't have it with me right now, but I started reading it, 3 years later, and the messages were, you're here amongst many to be a bearer of light in this transition of consciousness. Don't ask me. Don't ask me where that came from. But when Lee started channeling the Z's and they came through with that message that was very directed, I never really like to ask questions for myself in these interviews. I don't want to make it about myself, but this was just natural, and he or the Z's came through with that. And yeah, anyone can probably find that interview and see what they told me because it was a lot of information, but I feel like it activated a remembrance. And right now, a lot of the work that I'm doing is around just remembering who we are and dissolving these layers that told us what we were not. And so that was a big, as you asked that question, that was the experience that came to mind.
So awesome. So awesome. So that brings to mind. So, what through this whole process you've been through, one of the things that really stands out is that you do work really hard. Like it does sound like, I mean, you are that person who, and people ask me sometimes, like, what does it take to make it as a healer, as a channel, as a podcaster? And I often will say that it's just showing up. It's just keep showing up and you have done that in space. Like when you talk about your process with when you were a basketball player, you were there 2 hours before and an hour later. That sounds like that's your way of being, and it seems like it's just served you so incredibly well. But from that, I would say that's that is in a way a spiritual practice. And I'm wondering, what are your spiritual practices? What do you do right now for yourself, for your own journey?
Mm. One quote that comes to mind from Michael Beckwith is pain pushes and vision pulls.
Mm-hmm.
And really, I think we can call this a spiritual practice, but it really is devotion in all things. And even just like approaching an interview, this is something that we normally do before we start recording, but there's like a devotional prayer, a practice, a meditation that we do with a guest. We've done that a few times already with you, Anne, that really gets us into a state of opening to our, Dr. Sue Morter calls it the soulful self. And so by opening us up to that aspect of us that is not confined to the human ego or experience, then you have infinite energy. And so even yesterday, I went through a really intense day. I don't want to get too detailed into it, but there was a shooting right one block from my house here in Colombia. And that was like, oh my God, that opened a can of worms. And I was actually like, you know, maybe 10 feet away from the scene. And so these experiences happen in our life. And then it's like, can we be stretched to then use these tools and these realizations that we learn spiritually? I held the prayer at night, yesterday night for those two souls that were shot
Mm-hmm.
and realizing that life is eternal, life will cycle, and then, understanding that their families are going to grieve and they're going to go through that process. And when you can see things from these higher purview or perspective, you can still be in the human experience. Like I felt a lot of shock in the moment. Like I felt like my nervous system was out of whack, but then returning, coming back home after the whole scene and there was police, it was very chaotic. Um, and I get home, and here I live in a very quote unquote like bougie safe neighborhood here in Bogota. And either way, those things happen. And
Yeah.
I'm back home and I go into stillness. And for me, there's a moment when I close my eyes where I sort of merge with my soulful self. And it's just a very peaceful energy that I can tune into. And I know that it's always there available for me. Other than that as well, like other than, you know, for me, meditation is a way to open, but I also have times where I need to be in the human experience. So
Mm-hmm.
I can even say for me, having a glass of wine with friends is a spiritual practice. For me, going to the gym and lifting a bunch of weights and sweating and being in the sauna and taking a cold shower is a spiritual experience, is a spiritual practice. Because anything that allows you to be more in this experience
Mm-hmm.
is actually connecting you to the original intention of your spirit, which was to
Mm-hmm.
be here.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I live a very human life. For people that know me personally, like I joke around a lot. I make inappropriate jokes at times. I like to just laugh and make people laugh. And so, um, sometimes the person that you see that in an interview, like that's a aspect of me, I would say, an aspect of me that can hold a space for a conversation. But outside of that, I can also tune into other aspects of myself that allow me to access the totality of my soul's personality. My soul, I realize that souls actually do carry personalities too. And across lifetimes, I've had certain experiences where I've tuned into my soul in different aspects of expression. One of those has been like in a lion form, which is interesting, and it carries the same essence of who I am. So
Mm-hmm.
knowing that that essence never gets withered through lifetimes, it actually only expands to accumulate more of the totality of source.
Yeah.
So yeah, that anything that brings me back into this reality is for me very spiritual. I like to do a lot of physical things as well, move my body, yoga, meditation, breath work is huge for me. Like breath work has transformed my life. So yeah, I really like to use these tools so I could be more here and access the infinite energy that we always have so that those 1000 videos or whatever it is, if I have to record 2 interviews in a day, like the energy doesn't, obviously there's a room for rest and recovery and calming our nervous system after big experiences. Like I rested the rest of the day yesterday after what happened.
Wow.
Yeah, I couldn't really move myself to do anything else. I just had to just accept like this is where you are. Your nervous system is a little bit rattled up, but
Mm-hmm.
take this time, take this time. And also my mom was here in the apartment and I had just got into the elevator. I told my mom, I'm going to the gym. I go down, cross the street. The gym is literally 10 steps away from me,
Oh,
very convenient. And I go up, say hi to a friend, start my warm up set, and then I hear the three bangs outside of the gym. And my mom obviously thought I was involved in some, whatever came to her mind, I can't even imagine. So like we like talked about it afterwards and we're like, how are you feeling? Like she told me I need a hug and even just asking for what we need as a spiritual practice as well. So yeah, that was a little bit
wow.
of the experience.
I think that's so, I love that you shared that with us today because I feel like there is so much chaos in our world, and there's a good amount of it that we can see from a distance and we can feel from a distance, but more and more it's coming to our doorstep. And here, this came right to your doorstep, chaos right at your doorstep. And I know there's people commenting that there's chaos at their doorstep. And I mean, like, for example, the recent floods that happened, we had massive flooding in Washington state. The valley right below my house was flooded to the point that it was a lake, and there was houses floating down the river. Like it was bad. And it was like I came out, drive out my house down this road, and there it is, boom, at my doorstep. And I love that you're sharing, like, how is it that you cope with that? That you took a moment, that you took time to process and to feel your grief. And then, it's really interesting that you turn to embodiment, that embodiment helps you with processing your feelings and process. Is that true? Would you say that it sounds like you use meditation and breath work, but it sounds like it's a balance of those with embodiment practices such as yoga or even working out? Is that how you feel?
Yeah, just even taking a moment to, Dr. Sue Morter talks about the central channel. It's the central channel energetic that runs through all of our chakra system, and that's where
Mm-hmm.
your soul resides. So if you breathe into it, you're actually directly accessing not the totality of spirit, but fragments and aspects of your soul that are always here available. And also acknowledging, like in these chaotic experiences, I feel that when I tuned into why I was so close to the scene and the event, because it had
Mm-hmm.
nothing to do with me. It was, an actual hitman case where someone wanted to track some guy down. And, and I don't want to give a bad rap to,
Yeah. Yeah.
to my
Yeah.
country, but these are realities and it's happened in the States very recently as well. And so these things happen. But I also realized that I was supposed to go to the gym an hour or two before all of that happened. And it just so happened that I decided to go at that time, 2 minutes after or before, yeah, before it occurred. And there is a certain energy field that those of us here in this call that are working on our energy and are tuning into this aspect of us, that we're carrying this resonance field that we can't see with our eyes, but it can extend out into your whole neighborhood. And so
Mhm.
I know that when I'm doing this work, I can walk into a concert, I can walk into a chaotic scene like this and immediately stabilize the field. And I was really conscious of when the gym evacuated us and I was walking back home and the whole scene was going on. I was really consciously breathing, and through the breath and creating coherence in my field, that was in a way my intention, at least, was to create some sort of coherence and harmony in what was going on around me. And so we actually have more of an impact than we know or believe in. And your energy actually is not just affecting the people in the room that's around you, but in whole cities. The Maharishi effect, when they did that experiment, there was a monk that sat in one of the major cities, meditated for a few days, and then crime rates, violence goes down. So really, the more we work with our energy field and ourselves and tune into these layers of embodiment, we're creating a different field in our surroundings. And so I knew that there was a reason why I was so close to it, and I needed to be close to that and that situation and seen to at least help stabilize. And obviously, this isn't like I'm the hero, right? Like put my cape on. No, no, no. It's just acknowledging that you have an energy field that when you work with it, you begin to start influencing the world around you.
I love it. So, and that I think that makes me think about like the shift of consciousness and where we're headed. This idea that we're like, oh, why did all the light workers come right now? What are we doing here? We are sharing the light. We are being the light. We're trying to affect the field by our presence. Where do you think we're headed? What's your vision with all the people that you've talked to? What is your vision of New Earth? Where do you think we're going?
I feel like it all comes down to our choice, individual at
Mhm.
first, and then those choices will then become more attractive to some and more attractive to, or less attractive to others. And so a lot of people talk about this bifurcation or trifurcation of timelines. We're seeing such an emergence in the technological space. People are wanting to use this technology to enhance their abilities and think faster, produce faster, um, process faster. And I do feel there's going to be a faction that decides and chooses. And at the end, if we look at all these like concepts of splits and realities and timelines, at the end, already those timelines are playing out. And where are the choices that we align to that allow these realities to then manifest in our reality? And I do see that for me, the timeline that I desire, that I'm tuning into, is a timeline of more wholeness
Mhm.
with each other, with ourselves, of healing. I do see this huge vision and potential of micro communities sprouting around in all over the globe, and communities that are actually living in coherence and harmony with nature. I'm really lucky that here in Colombia, we still have a lot of indigenous tribes and cultures that are still around, and understanding how connected they are with their environment, everything that's around them. I feel like we might go so far into those extremes, like the mother of creation has been talking about this inhale until we can no longer inhale any longer, that the exhale then becomes like a dissolving of everything that was not necessarily aligned with divine will and Earth's intention to ascend as well. So I'm really here just for the ride, to be honest. I'm really here to witness one of the greatest transformations in human history. I feel like we picked a really good timeline to pop into, and just realizing that instead of giving our responsibility away to an authority figure, a guru, or someone making the decisions, we can come together in communities and decide which micro realities we want to create. because
Yeah.
already there's 8 billion people, 8 billion universes, 8 billion versions of Earth. So it's not like, oh, the world's going to go this way. It's, there's always going to be, right now, there's people living heaven on earth in their
Mm-hmm.
reality. And then
Mm-hmm.
there's also people living the opposite of that as well. And so I feel like with the new frequencies of light that are coming through, I'm really optimistic about the new souls, not the new souls, but the children, the waves that are coming in. Like I know I want to be a father, and I'm seeing my generation, I'm seeing the generations above and below me also opening up to their own consciousness, that what type of children will they raise?
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like it all begins in the household. It all, for me, my awakening was due to my mother. So really optimistic about more people understanding these concepts and consciousness itself. The scientific discoveries that are coming through right now, like we have a newsletter. It's called Tap In Today. And the reason I wanted to create a newsletter of that was to report not like the news that you see on CNN, but the
Yeah.
news that you see like that isn't told about discoveries that are happening in quantum physics, in aging, in cell regeneration, in telepathic abilities, like that's what I want to report on because it's like what we focus on grows.
Yeah.
So I'm not too worried about like those dystopian timelines and the microchips and all that. Um, if we're presented with the choice, then it's our responsibility to tune in. But knowing that in the greater existence of things, there's no judgment on your
Yeah.
choice. And so that's something, yeah, that I tune into is like really choice at the end of the day, and stepping into more freedom in our lives.
I love it. And people are asking for the name of that. It's the Just Tap In. What is the newsletter called? Just Tap, because
Oh,
Just Tap In is the name of this podcast. What's the name of the newsletter?
oh, we called it Tap In Today,
Tap In Today.
a
Love it. Love
newsletter
it.
vibe.
Yeah, love it. So, okay, so I want to mention to everybody part of the reason this opportunity came about for Emilio and I to be together this morning and to talk about his story was because we have been spending a lot of time together lately, which is amazing and super, it's been super fun. And that has come through the process of we're putting together a collaboration that Emilio is a community builder. He thrives within community, and that has always been something that feeds my soul as well. So it just was a really natural expression for both of us on this journey to come together and talk about what can we create together. And so we've been in the process of creating. Would you like to tell them the name of our new project, Emilio?
Yeah, but just for context, I was re-listening to our last conversation, and that we filmed about a few weeks ago. I think it was published a month ago on the channel, and it was the first time I had actually intimately gotten to talk with the mother of creation, because in our previous interviews, the angels always came through. And I was completely blown away with the channeling that came through Mother of Creation, how practical it was as well. And I just felt this heart opening, and I was re-listening to it today. Um, and one thing that the Mother of Creation said is that her favorite thing is freedom. And when she said that, I remembered back then in the present moment, I I remembered that the original intention for all of this work for me was for the liberation of humanity. And the liberation of humanity for me means to dissolve everything that we're not. And so freedom, and especially like my really close work with the gene keys, if you go to one of the most important gene keys, the gift and the CD is freedom. And that's where the big prophecy is in Richard Rudd's teaching of the gene keys, is we're ultimately heading into this era of freedom. And the mother of creation then starts explaining that the way that we create is transitioning from fear-based creation into a more freedom level creation, where we're dissolving these aspects that we're not. And so we brought through, then we said, okay, we need to record a transmission just around freedom and everything that is going on with the transitions of this.
Yeah.
And so 90 minutes of just pure channeling. I felt like I was it's like half of a book, and my
It
idea to
is.
end was like let's write a book.
Yeah.
Um, and what came through was really powerful. And from there, we decided to create a whole initiation that would last then 3 weeks, where we get to explore freedom not only as a concept but as a lived experience. So the name, as you asked, is the Freedom Project, and we're starting that very very soon. I think it'll go live this Saturday on Valentine's. So yeah, I'm really excited about it. What has it meant for you and
Oh
the
my
Freedom
gosh.
Project?
Yeah. I mean, and just to say through that whole channeling that we did together, that you were guiding the conversation and asking the questions. So it was this beautiful collaborative process between you and Isla, the mother of creation, as I was in channel. And I got to play too, because afterwards we get together and we talk about it. So I'm in there too. But but the part that I think is really exciting is that because of the structure of how you work and how I work, there's that conversation with her, and kind of she sort of giving us this body of knowledge that then we are taking and breaking down and working through in a bunch of different layers. Like, you know how we were talking about how embodiment is one of your spiritual practices, where we've built that into the Freedom Project. And we built community into the Freedom Project. It's really taking these parts of that have been meaningful to you on your journey and meaningful to me on my journey, and we're creating an experience together. And I think that is exciting, really, really exciting. It's a container and an experience within that container. And it's guided around this whole understanding. And I feel like the freedom, but as she was telling us, it's like, and I didn't know that about Richard Rudd and the Gene Keys. It's always so amazing when you get these confirmations, because she says freedom is, she says that is the step that we have to take to get from this energy of this universe of will, this reality based on will, and this 3D reality that we are in right now, to get to the next, higher state of consciousness. Freedom is the step we have to take. That it's the doorway, it's the gateway. And so, yeah, so this whole thing, I love this idea that we're exploring together and sharing together about how are we not free, and how can we embrace more freedom. Yeah, so it's I'm super excited for it.
Yeah, the last thing I wanted to say on that is for me, the transmissions are very powerful. And sometimes when I leave a channeling, I don't really know what to do with the information. It just feels like it came in and then it did its work on my cellular level and physical body, whatever it needed. I'm usually very thirsty after a channeling. So the reason we wanted to create this like as a container for people is because we're going to be on Mondays and Thursdays, a live call. You and I will
Mhm.
probably bring in the Mother of Creation live as well. And then throughout the week, there's this notion that came up for us around quests. So creating quests where you can actually bring these teachings into your life. For example, I'm going to give an example of like a mini quest that I would love to implement is when I moved to Colombia, I was already late to the game. Everyone already knew how to dance, salsa, merengue, bachata, all these things. So for me, dance always became an experience that constricted me of my freedom. And a friend of mine, Peter Crone, he says that all of the people and experiences in your life that come in are just showing you where you're not free. And so for me, dancing has always been that aspect of like, I would love to feel so fluid in my body and express my body in a way that just feels like a butterfly, like just free, like no restrictions whatsoever, no chains on myself. And so there are going to be certain quests that we'll give out at the beginning of the week so that as a community, we can bring these quests into our life. And we'll also have like these community spaces where people can actually share. Like this was the quest of the week. Um, Community integration calls with facilitators, people that are really devoted to this work and helping also liberate humanity. And I just feel like it's going to be an experience that we all get to tune into for fun as well. Just play and fun. And it doesn't have to be like the shadow work and, look at all the places where your mother traumatized you. And it's really tuning into the new levels of creation. where we
Freedom
let
is fun,
go.
right? Freedom
Yeah.
is really fun. One of the things I'm excited about for it are the that we're going to do small group breakouts so that people can actually talk about and share, because there's, you and I talk through the channelings and what we learned and stuff like that, but I think it's really helpful for integration for people to be able to meet in smaller, and that's part of the community, is being able to have these calls where people are in small groups where they can form connections and can speak. It's that activation of the throat chakra. It's part of that activation of, it's the letting it, taking it in and letting it out again, that I think that really helps with grounding it into your reality. So yeah, part again about that embodiment, right? So yeah, I'm excited about that. Yeah, and people are asking, yeah, you can absolutely, if you're in Soul Convergence, you can absolutely do the Freedom Project for sure. And you're asking that, yeah, in terms of Europe, we're going to be doing a lot of stuff. Yep, Rebecca, you'll be in there. So I think we're talking about the stuff starting at 10 a.m. Pacific. So, which should work well for all our European friends. And of course, there'll be recordings and stuff like that too. So, but yeah, so everybody's really excited about it. The comments are awesome. So yeah,
I'm
it's,
feeling that by the end of this 3 weeks, Anne and I will probably have birthed a book.
I think
And
so
so
too.
it's like whoever joins us in this journey will like at the end like witness the birthing of a transmission book, like these Esther Abraham Hicks type, where Jerry's asking the
Mhm.
questions. That's always been a dream of mine to
Yeah,
bring through a transmission of that nature into like a physical form as well. So we'll
it's
see. We'll see.
happening. It's happening.
I'm here planting the seeds. You guys have to encourage Anne to write this
Yes.
book with me, guys.
I love it. Oh my gosh, Emilio, what a phenomenal conversation. You make an amazing guest, and you should do it a lot more often. So
Thank
phenomenal.
you.
And people just loved it. So, and I hopefully we hit most people's questions. I know I've been reading through and trying to assimilate the questions that everybody's been asking, but you have a lot of really dedicated friends here in our chat community. So just so you know. So those of you that are part of our Soul Society, which is, yes, part of our community, you guys, now we always invite our Wisdom Soup guests to come in and to have an intimate experience. So Emilio is going to come into that community with us now and guide us all in a meditation, which we're super excited for. So those of you in Soul Society, come on over. We will meet you there. And thank you so much, you guys, for being here today. It's been awesome to share this experience, to generate this excitement I feel in what's coming up and what's growing for all of humanity, and then what we're creating together. So yeah, the Freedom Project.
Beautiful. Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much,
Emilio.
everyone, for holding the space, and Anne, Kira, Wendy, for having me here. Really, really appreciate this energy, and I can feel a lot of love coming from everyone. So, thank you so much.
Phenomenal. Bye, you guys. See you next Wisdom Soup next month. Always the second Thursday of the month. We'll see you next time. Bye, you guys.
Bye bye.